Hi everyone, my name is Kate Motaung from 5minutefriday.com, and I'm here today with my co-author Shannon Popkin. Hi Shannon.
Hi, Kate.
Thanks so much for being here with me.
It's always great to be with you.
For those who've been following along, we are busy with a 12 video series called the Influence series, and this is session 12 of 12, so we've made it to the end. This is our final interview, yay! And if you haven't been following along, we are going through chapters from this book called Influence, Building a Platform that Elevates Jesus, Not Me, which Shannon and I had the privilege of co-authoring together. And if you have been following along, we saw Shannon in chapter 1 and chapter 7, and now we're back to wrap things up with the final chapter, which is on the topic of trust. For those who haven't caught the videos, you can find them at 5minutefriday.com/influence series. So Shannon, we've gone through a lot of material in these 12 sessions, and you and I obviously are very familiar with the material in the book, but in this final chapter, what would you say is the main way that we're trying to wrap it up with this concept of trust?
Yeah, I think that when we talk about platform building, we put so much of the responsibility on our own shoulders, and it doesn't belong there. We have not been the ones to initiate this work in ourselves. It was God who first stirred us to write or speak or lead. And so we need to just take that responsibility off our shoulders, lay it down, and trust that He will do with it as He will. And He'll give us the words to speak, just like right now He's giving Kate, you and I, the words to speak. I've had a pretty frazzled afternoon. I'm sure you have too, but we can trust Him. We can lay that burden down of trying to be perfect or trying to manage it all, trying to, just the angst of trying to do well with what we've been given, with the influence we've been entrusted, and just release it and give God control, and trust that He will do the work.
Oh, that's good. And Shannon, in this chapter, you share a story about a time when you had your very first book contract, when you also had to kind of release control and leave things in God's hands. Will you share a little summary of what happened with your first book contract?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we find out how well we're really doing with trust when we lose control of something, right? How much are we trusting in ourselves versus trusting in God? And actually, ironically, that happened to me while I was writing a book about control. So my first book, the title is Control Girl. And I was so excited to get a publishing contract with one of the biggest Christian publishers in the industry, and had worked really hard and given my all to this project. And I made it to the finish line. The manuscript was due just like 2 weeks later. And one afternoon I clicked save, and I was like, oh, it's complete, like it's finished. I have 2 more weeks to polish it up. So I picked up the phone and called my husband and said, it's done. I'm so excited. And he said, let's go out for dinner to celebrate. And I hung up the phone and opened my email, and there before me was an official termination of my contract with my publisher. They had not even had a chance to read it yet. It didn't have anything to do with me personally. It was just they were shuffling some things around, and my contract was part of a line of books that they were discontinuing, they said. And so it was just something that I had no control over. So here I was, right, had written a book on control and had lost control of my control book. So, I was pretty sad about that. I had worked so hard, and I was so excited about all of the things that God had showed me, as I was writing. I was like elated about what I had the opportunity to share with readers, and now that was taken. So, it was difficult. There's no other way around it, but I just committed myself to living what I had just spent 9 months writing about. Over and over and over in that book, I talk about surrendering control to God, that, our control, it is an illusion. And so like any sense that we have that we are in control or we should be in control is false.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, God is in control, and that's a good, it's a good thing. I didn't see it at the time, but looking back, I do see that it was a very, very good thing. That God moved me to a different publisher. I think he gave me that first contract so that I would get the work done. Can you relate to that, Kate? Having a deadline?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like we as writers, it's like really hard to accomplish something without a deadline. And I would have never self-imposed a deadline. And so I think God gave me that, like God knew all along that was not going to be my publisher, but he gave me this sort of false deadline to get the work done. And then now I can really see how this, my book was published with Kriegel Publications, and they're also publishing another book that I'm working on right now. But they just invested so much in the project and did such a great job with presenting the material. And I just so appreciated the special attention that they gave my book. And then I just found out recently that they will be translating the book into Spanish. And their sister, Kriegel has a sister company, I think that's the way that they would say it, that's a Spanish publisher, and it's actually one of the larger parts of their company. And so I am thrilled that Control Girl will be going to Spanish. And God has just given me a heart for these Latina women. I got to go to Costa Rica this summer and meet some of them. And Revive Our Hearts is the blog that I write for, and we're very invested at Revive Our Hearts in other pockets and other cultures, and our Spanish speaking sisters are one of our primary we love our partnership with them. And so I am just thrilled, and I can see, looking back, that God took that book and placed it somewhere else, and I had a little period of waiting, and man, I learned something about trust, right? That I can trust God even when it feels like things are out of control, or that I don't have control of something. He ultimately is in control.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing that. I hope those who are listening will be encouraged that even when things don't turn out the way that we anticipate, and we might even have huge disappointments in the writing and speaking life, that he's still using it for our good in those ways. Shannon, you also mentioned in the chapter a concept called hold and fold. Could you talk a little bit about that and explain what that process looks like?
Yeah, so this is actually from that Control Girl book. Something that I and many of my readers have found really helpful is sort of dividing up everything in life into two categories. So like over here, I'll back up and use my hand. So over here we would have things that I can control. Over here would be the things that I cannot control. And so like Kate, what can you and I ultimately control? What goes in this category?
Well, we can control how we use our time. Mostly, we can control how we use our time. We can control our own responses to things and our attitudes, and whether or not we choose to use the gifts that we've been given.
Yes, absolutely. So basically what fits into this category is me. I can control me, my actions, my attitudes, my responses, and everything else slides over here into this other category. And so in responding to those two categories, I borrowed this from another author. We say hold. So hold responsibility of me, what I can control, and fold my hands and surrender on everything else that I cannot control. I always say control girls like to do exactly the opposite. So I don't want to control myself. I don't want to sit myself in the chair and do the work and, control my own time schedule or whatever. And I want to control everything that I can't control. Like I don't want to fold my hands. I want to get my hands on it. But oh my goodness, so much peace and security and joy come from surrendering control back to God, trusting him, and so much angst and jealousy and perfectionism and fear and anger. Those are all the negative things that come from me trying to get my hands on things that I ultimately cannot control.
Oh, thank you. That's such a good principle to keep in mind with those two categories. Just what are we able to control? What are we not able to control? And surrendering everything up to the Lord in that way. Thank you, Shannon. So for those who followed along, I hope this series has been a great blessing. We've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the tension that Christian writers and speakers often face when it comes to platform building in particular. We've talked about the fears that so often accompany these kinds of efforts. We've talked about our calling and the importance of calling and sifting through our motives, battling pride and comparison, ultimately wanting to serve our readers and serve our audiences, which is such an important component, and many other topics as well. So again, if you've missed any of these interviews, I encourage you to visit 5minutefriday.com/influence series. And if you haven't picked up a copy of the book yet, you can get copies of Influence either at shannonpopkin.com, at 5minutefriday.com, or on Amazon. I hope you've enjoyed this series, and thank you so much again, Shannon, for being here today.
Thank you. And aren't you glad we got to do this together, Kate? It was so much fun.
It was so much fun.
So thanks everybody for joining us. Take care.
Bye.